Imagine standing 80,000 feet above the Earth. At this height, the sky loses its familiar blue, deepening into an ink-black void that whispers of the cosmos. You are strapped into a cockpit, hurtling through the thin air at more than 2,000 miles per hour. The friction is so intense that the skin of your aircraft isn't just hot, it glows a furious molten red. The metal plates of the fuselage groan and stretch, expanding so much that the airframe actually leaks fuel, like a machine sweating under the sheer weight of physics. This is the SR-71 Blackbird, the crown jewel of Lockheed Martin. But the real story isn't just the speed, it's the shadow play behind it. To build this titanium ghost, the United States needed a mountain of metal they simply did not have. So, the CIA spun a web of ghost companies, a high-stakes masquerade that led them straight to the doorstep of their greatest enemy, the Soviet Union. They told the Kremlin they were building high-end pizza ovens. Moscow smiled, took the cash, and shipped the titanium. The irony is delicious and deadly. The Soviets unknowingly provided the very bone and marrow for the weapon that would haunt their skies for decades. A phantom they could see on radar, but could never, ever touch. This is the Lockheed Martin way, turning the impossible into reality, often through back alleys and whispered deals. But to understand the Lockheed of today, you have to realize they are far more than just a company that builds jets. In the halls of Washington, they are spoken of as a state within a state. Their influence is woven into the very fabric of American global hegemony. Take a moment to process this. The F-35 Lightning II program. It isn't just a plane. It's a $1.7 trillion digital nervous system. To put that into perspective, that single project's budget is so staggering, it could swallow the net worth of tech giants like Tesla, Meta, and Visa combined, and still have change left over. It is the most expensive weapon system in human history. Yet Lockheed's true genius isn't just in the engineering of the cockpit. It's in the engineering of the map. They haven't just built factories. They have anchored themselves into the very soil of 45 out of the 50 United States. Every bolt, every microchip, and every wing flap is tied to a local economy. For a politician, voting against a Lockheed contract isn't just a policy choice. It's a career gamble. It means taking bread off the tables of thousands of families in their own district. They have made themselves too big to fail by becoming the invisible hand that steadies the scales of global power. Yet, if you peel back the layers of cold steel, complex silicon, and heavy political muscle, you won't find a gleaming glass tower or a futuristic laboratory. Instead, you'll find a drafty, sawdust-filled shed in California, circa 1912. It smelled of fresh pine and raw ambition. You'll find two brothers, the Lockheads, who spent their days fighting gravity with little more than wood glue, canvas, and a dream that everyone else called insanity. They failed. They went bankrupt, not once, but twice. Their name was forgotten, their bank accounts were empty, but their vision survived. How did a humble carpentry shop evolve into the wizards of the sky? How did they become the architects of Area 51, holding secrets that the government still refuses to put into words? And as we look at the monsters they are building for tomorrow, hypersonic missiles that turn the air around them into plasma, and reactors that attempt to harness the power of a star, we have to ask the ultimate question. What is the true price of being the most powerful name in the sky? Is Lockheed Martin the guardian of the free world, or a shadow empire fueled by perpetual conflict? Today, we go beyond the hangar doors. We are declassifying the rise of a Titan. Welcome to the deep dive into Lockheed Martin, the architects of the impossible. Chapter 1: The $40,000 Resurrection. To understand the sheer magnitude of Lockheed Martin, you have to look past the billion-dollar satellites and the stealth fighters of today. You have to travel back to the golden, dusty hills of California in 1912. It was a time when flight wasn't a science. It was a form of madness. In a small garage in Santa Barbara, two brothers, Alan and Malcolm Lockheed, were building their dreams out of spruce wood and wire. Their first creation, the Model G, was a beautiful, lumbering seaplane that took tourists for rides over the Pacific. But the brothers faced a problem that was uniquely American: their own name. Lockheed was a phonetic nightmare. People called them logheads, lowheads, or worse. In the world of high-stakes aviation, your name needs to sound like the future, not a piece of timber. So, Alan made a decision that would define the brand forever. He changed the spelling to Lockheed. It sounded fast. It sounded sharp. It sounded like it belonged in the sky. But the name change couldn't save them from the brutal reality of the post-World War I economy. By 1921, the market was flooded with cheap surplus planes, and the Lockheed dream hit a brick wall. They went bankrupt. Alan, heartbroken, was forced back into selling real estate and bricks, watching from the sidelines as the aviation industry he helped build began to take off without him. But the story of Lockheed is a story of resurrections. Fast forward to 1932. The Great Depression was suffocating the world. Breadlines stretched for blocks, and the aviation industry was seen as a playground for fools and daredevils. Yet, amidst the wreckage, an investor named Robert Gross saw a diamond in the rough. He did something that most people at the time considered financial suicide. He bought the bankrupt Lockheed Aircraft Company for just $40,000. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the price of a mid-sized SUV today. For 40 grand, Gross didn't just buy a company, he bought the keys to the future. Gross wasn't a pilot or a tinkerer. He was a man of cold, hard business and grand industrial vision. He didn't want a boutique workshop. He wanted a powerhouse. He brought in the bankers, the discipline, and most importantly, the world's most brilliant young engineers. He transformed Lockheed from a struggling artist's studio into a sleek industrial juggernaut, ready for the storm that was gathering on the horizon. The timing was perfect, because by the late 1930s, the world was on the brink of fire, and the US military realized they were dangerously behind. When World War II erupted, the Army Air Corps issued a challenge that seemed impossible. Build an interceptor that could fly faster and climb higher than anything in the world. Lockheed's response was a design so radical, it looked like it belonged in a science fiction novel. It had two engines, twin tail booms, and a sleek central pod for the pilot. It was the P-38 Lightning. When it first rolled onto the tarmac, skeptics laughed. It looked wrong. It looked fragile. But the moment it took to the air, the laughter stopped. The Germans called it der Gabelschwanzteufel, the fork-tailed devil. It was a ghost that haunted the Luftwaffe. In the Pacific, it became the terror of the Imperial Japanese Navy. The P-38 wasn't just a plane. It was a surgical instrument of war. It was the P-38 that carried out one of the most daring assassinations in military history. Operation Vengeance, flying nearly 1,000 miles over open ocean to intercept and shoot down the plane carrying Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the mastermind behind Pearl Harbor. The success of the P-38 proved something vital about the Lockheed DNA, that the strangest, most impossible designs were often the most lethal. It proved that in the hands of Lockheed, a radical idea wasn't a risk. It was a weapon. By the time the smoke of World War II cleared, Lockheed wasn't just a survivor of the Depression. They were the undisputed masters of the American sky. They had bridged the gap from the wood-glued biplanes of the past to the high-performance metal monsters of the modern age. But even as the world celebrated peace, Lockheed was already looking higher, into the thin, cold air where no one else dared to follow. Chapter 2: Wizards of the Skunk Works. While the P-38 was winning wars in the light of day, something far more mysterious was breathing life in the shadows. To understand the modern world of black projects, you have to understand the year 1943. The Allies were facing a terrifying new reality. Nazi Germany had developed the Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. It was faster than anything the Americans had. The Pentagon panicked. They called Lockheed with an impossible demand: build us a jet and do it in 180 days. Lockheed's answer wasn't a sprawling factory or a committee of suits. It was a circus tent, literally. Because the main factory was overflowing with wartime production, a small, hand-picked team of engineers was moved into a rented tent next to a plastic manufacturing plant. The air was thick with the nauseating sulfuric stench of chemicals, a smell so foul that the team began calling their workspace the Skunk Works, named after a backwoods moonshine still in a popular comic strip. They worked in the heat, in the stench, and in total secrecy. They didn't just meet the 180-day deadline, they rolled out the XP-80 Shooting Star in just 143 days. It was a miracle of engineering birthed in a boneyard, and it changed the way America built its secrets forever. At the heart of this miracle was Clarence Kelly Johnson. If Robert Gross was the brain of Lockheed, Kelly Johnson was its soul and its fire. Kelly was a man who had no patience for bureaucracy or the way things have always been done. He operated on a set of 14 management rules that are still studied in business schools today. Rule number 1: the Skunk Works manager must be delegated practically complete control of his program in all aspects. In other words, stay out of my way. Kelly was known to kick 4-star generals out of his office if they asked too many stupid questions that wasted his engineers' time. He created a culture of brutal honesty and lightning-fast iteration. In the Skunk Works, you didn't file a report, you grabbed a wrench. You didn't wait for a meeting, you fixed the problem. As the 1950s rolled in and the Cold War began to freeze over, the Skunk Works moved from circus tents to the most desolate corners of the American map. The CIA needed a plane that could fly so high it was untouchable. Kelly Johnson found the perfect spot for testing, a dry lake bed in the Nevada desert known as Groom Lake. To make it sound more appealing to his engineers, he called it Paradise Ranch. History would know it as Area 51. When the U-2 spy plane first took flight from the ranch, it was a silver needle reflecting the sun at 70,000 feet. To a commercial pilot or an observer on the ground, seeing a metallic object glowing in the twilight, long after the sun had set on the horizon, looked like something from another world. This is the grounded truth behind the UFO craze of the 50s and 60s. The government was happy to let people believe in little green men because the truth, that Lockheed had built a camera that could read a newspaper from 13 miles up, was a secret worth more than any alien. But for every U-2 or Blackbird that redefined the sky, there were projects that were simply insane. Take Project Suntan. In the late 50s, Lockheed tried to build a Mach 2.5 interceptor fueled entirely by liquid hydrogen. It was a masterpiece of ambition, but it was also a flying bomb. To make it work, Lockheed built the world's largest secret hydrogen plant. Eventually, even Kelly Johnson, a man who never met a challenge he didn't like, admitted it was too dangerous. He did the unthinkable in the defense industry. He shut it down and returned the money to the government. Then there was the D-21. It was a sleek Mach 3 drone designed to be launched off the back of a Blackbird. During a test flight in 1966, the drone failed to clear the aircraft, colliding with the mothership and causing a catastrophic explosion at 3 times the speed of sound. One pilot survived. One did not. Years later, one of these ultra-secret drones crashed deep inside China. Instead of exploding into dust, it landed relatively intact. Today, that piece of top-secret American failure is on display in a Beijing museum, a rare public scar on the Skunk Works record of invisibility. The secrets of Lockheed didn't just stay in the air, they went to the bottom of the ocean. In 1968, a Soviet nuclear submarine, the K-129, sank to the crushing depths of the Pacific. The CIA wanted it. They wanted the codebooks and the nuclear warheads. They turned to Lockheed to build the Claw, a massive mechanical capture system hidden inside a giant ship called the Glomar Explorer. The cover story was that billionaire Howard Hughes was mining manganese nodules from the sea floor. It was Project Azorian. In 1974, under the cover of darkness and crashing waves, Lockheed's mechanical hand reached down 3 miles and grabbed the Soviet sub. As they pulled it up, the hull snapped. Most of the sub plummeted back into the abyss, but Lockheed managed to bring up a portion of it. It remains one of the most expensive and daring intelligence operations in history, a testament to a company that was no longer just building planes, but was now manipulating the very environment of the Cold War, from the edge of space to the floor of the sea. Lockheed had become the ultimate fixer for the American government. If a problem was too fast, too high, or too deep for anyone else, the answer was always the same: call the skunk. But as the 70s ended, this culture of secret brilliance was about to collide with the messy public world of global politics and corporate greed. Chapter 3: The Last Supper, Bribery, and Blood. By the mid-1970s, Lockheed was the undisputed king of the secret sky. But on the ground, the empire was starting to crack. Success in the defense world doesn't just come from superior engineering. It often comes from who you know and whose pockets you line. This led to one of the most explosive scandals in corporate history, the Lockheed bribery scandal. To secure sales for their F-104 Starfighter and L-1011 TriStar, Lockheed executives didn't just negotiate, they wrote checks. Millions of dollars in consulting fees, code for cold, hard bribes, flowed into the hands of high-ranking officials in Japan, West Germany, Italy, and the Netherlands. The fallout was a political earthquake. In Japan, Prime Minister Kikuei Tanaka was hauled off to jail in a scandal that traumatized the nation. In the Netherlands, Prince Bernhard was forced to resign his military functions. It was a moment of deep national shame for the US as well, forcing Congress to take drastic action. This single company's ethical collapse led to the birth of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA, a law that fundamentally changed how every American company does business abroad to this day. Lockheed had become so powerful, they weren't just breaking records. They were forcing the world to rewrite its laws. But the price of power wasn't just measured in dollars. It was measured in lives. Lockheed's F-104 starfighter was a marvel of speed, a literal missile with a man in it. But in West Germany, it earned a much darker nickname, the Widowmaker. The aircraft was notoriously difficult to fly, and the German Air Force lost nearly 300 planes and over 100 pilots in non-combat accidents. The arrogance of pushing a high-performance, unforgiving machine onto allies became a stain on Lockheed's reputation. Simultaneously, their attempt to dominate the civilian world was bleeding them white. The L-1011 TriStar was arguably the most advanced airliner of its time, featuring an automated landing system that was decades ahead of its rivals. But a series of delays and the bankruptcy of its engine supplier, Rolls-Royce, turned the project into a financial black hole. Lockheed was hemorrhaging cash, standing on the precipice of bankruptcy for the second time in its history. They were saved only by a controversial $250 million government loan guarantee, a move that sparked a heated debate in the US about whether a private company should ever be too big to fail. As the 1990s dawned, the world changed again. The Berlin Wall fell, the Soviet Union collapsed, and the peace dividend meant the US government was slashing defense budgets. The Pentagon realized it couldn't sustain dozens of competing contractors anymore. In 1993, Deputy Secretary of Defense Les Aspin invited the top CEOs of the defense industry to a private dinner that has since become legendary in Washington lore as the Last Supper. The message was cold and clear. We are cutting the budget, and we don't have enough seats at the table for all of you. Consolidate or disappear. It was a government-mandated game of musical chairs. Lockheed took the hint and made the most aggressive move in the industry. In 1995, Lockheed merged with Martin Marietta, a titan of missiles and electronics, to form the colossus we know today, Lockheed Martin. This wasn't just a merger. It was the creation of a defense monopoly that controlled everything from the ocean floor to the outer reaches of the atmosphere. In this new era, Lockheed Martin began to experiment with more than just planes. They built the Sea Shadow, a radical stealth ship that looked like something ripped out of a James Bond film. It was designed to be completely invisible to naval radar, a floating ghost with a twin-hull design that sliced through waves in total silence. For years, it was tested only at night, hidden inside a massive floating hangar to keep it away from Soviet satellites. But the Sea Shadow was a victim of its own perfection. It was too expensive, too niche, and the Navy eventually realized they didn't have a practical use for a stealth ship that couldn't carry a heavy weapon load. By 2012, this multi-million-dollar masterpiece of engineering was sold for scrap metal, because not even a museum could afford to maintain it. It was a humbling reminder that even for Lockheed Martin, being too far ahead of the curve could be a death sentence. But as the 20th century closed, the company was no longer just an airplane company. They were a data company, a space company, and a political powerhouse. And they were about to embark on the most expensive, controversial, and ambitious project in the history of human warfare. Chapter 4: The $1.7 trillion machine. As the 1970s bled into the 80s, Lockheed engineers stopped thinking about how to fight the air and started thinking about how to fight the invisible. For decades, the law of aviation was simple. Smooth, curved surfaces were aerodynamic and fast. But curves reflect radar waves like a mirror reflects light. To become invisible, Lockheed had to do the unthinkable. They had to build a plane out of flat, jagged triangles. When the first designs for the F-117 Nighthawk were shown to the flight experts, they laughed. They called it the hopeless diamond, because, according to the laws of physics, something shaped like a crumpled piece of paper had no business staying in the air. It was aerodynamically unstable on every axis. It didn't fly because of its wings. It flew because a computer was micro-adjusting its control surfaces dozens of times every second, essentially tricking the atmosphere into letting it pass. The hopeless diamond changed the geometry of war. In the opening night of the Gulf War, these jagged ghosts glided over Baghdad, unnoticed by the most sophisticated defense networks on Earth, and dismantled a nation's command structure before the first siren could even wail. Lockheed had successfully transitioned from being masters of speed to being masters of the spectrum. But this victory set the stage for a project so ambitious, so expensive, and so complex that it would nearly swallow the company and the Pentagon's budget whole. The F-35 Lightning II. The F-35 isn't just a plane. It's a $1.7 trillion gamble. It was designed to be the Swiss Army knife of the sky. One airframe that could serve the Air Force, the Navy, and the Marines. But trying to be everything to everyone created a technical nightmare. It became the most expensive weapon system in human history, plagued by years of delays and astronomical cost overruns. Yet, when you step inside the cockpit, or rather put on the equipment, you realize where that money went. The F-35 pilot wears a helmet that costs $400,000, more than a suburban home in many parts of America. This isn't just a helmet. It is a gateway to a godlike awareness. Through a system of 6 infrared cameras embedded in the skin of the jet, the pilot can literally look through the floor of the cockpit. If they look down, they don't see their boots. They see the ground 10 miles below, rendered in perfect thermal clarity. They aren't flying a machine. They are wearing a digital nervous system that can track hundreds of targets simultaneously and share that data with every ship and tank in the theater. It is the ultimate expression of Lockheed's security for the 21st century, where information is more lethal than any missile. But in a world where your weapon is essentially a flying supercomputer, your greatest threat isn't a surface-to-air missile. It's a line of code. In 2011, the fortress of Lockheed was breached. In a sophisticated cyber attack, hackers targeted RSA, the company providing the security tokens used by Lockheed employees. By breaching the supplier, they found a back door into the digital vaults of the world's most powerful defense contractor. While Lockheed remained tight-lipped about what was stolen, many defense analysts pointed to the sudden, eerie resemblance between the F-35 and the next generation of stealth fighters emerging from rival nations. It was a chilling reminder that in the digital age, $1 billion stealth coding is worthless if someone steals the blueprints from your server. This vulnerability leads us to a startling paradox. Why, despite the astronomical costs, the technical glitches, and the security breaches, does the F-35 project continue to move forward? The answer isn't just military. It's a masterclass in political survival. Lockheed Martin has mastered the art of political engineering. They have strategically distributed the manufacturing of the F-35 across 45 out of 50 U.S. states. They didn't just build a plane, they built a jobs program that is tied to the survival of hundreds of congressional districts. When a project is tied to thousands of local jobs and billions in local revenue, it becomes too big to fail. For a politician, voting to cut the F-35 budget isn't just an act of fiscal responsibility, it's an act of political suicide that could devastate their hometown economy. Lockheed has woven itself so deeply into the American economic and political fabric that the company and the country have become a symbiotic organism. They don't just lobby the government, they have become an indispensable part of its foundation, ensuring that as long as America remains a superpower, Lockheed Martin will be the one holding the hammer. As we stand on the threshold of tomorrow, Lockheed Martin is no longer just chasing the wind. They are trying to outrun physics itself. We have entered the era of hypersonic flight, a frontier where the air doesn't just resist you, it tries to incinerate you. At 5 times the speed of sound, friction creates a sheath of superheated plasma around the missile, reaching temperatures that would liquefy structural steel in seconds. To conquer this, Lockheed isn't just building engines. They are engineering new materials that can survive the heart of a furnace. In this race, the distance between continents is measured in minutes, and the window for human reaction has effectively closed. This leads us to a shift even more chilling than raw speed: the Golden Horde. This is the move from human-piloted machines to a collective AI hive mind. Imagine a swarm of missiles launched into a theater of war. They don't wait for orders from a base thousands of miles away. Instead, they talk to each other. They deliberate. If one missile sees a radar dish, it tells the others to adjust their targets. They coordinate their strikes in a digital whisper, deciding in a millisecond who lives and what dies. It is a terrifying evolution where the fog of war is replaced by an algorithm of absolute precision. Yet, in the same secret labs where these harbingers of destruction are born, Lockheed is also chasing the ultimate holy grail of humanity: the compact fusion reactor. For decades, they have teased a dream of a power source that mimics the sun: clean, limitless energy that could fit on the back of a truck. If successful, it wouldn't just fuel a military base. It could end the global struggle for resources, erase the carbon footprint of entire cities, and potentially solve the very crises that lead to war in the first place. It is the ultimate Lockheed paradox. The same hands building the world's most lethal hunters are also trying to build the engine that could save civilization. But as we look at the world today, the impossible feels heavy. From the smoke-filled skies over the Middle East to the grinding high-tech trenches of Eastern Europe, the fingerprints of the architects of the impossible are everywhere. In Gaza or the Levant, the rumble of a jet overhead isn't just noise. It is the sound of a trillion-dollar geopolitical machine. Lockheed Martin provides the shield that defends cities and the sword that dismantles them. They are the engine of a global order that is as fragile as it is formidable. So, what is Lockheed Martin? Are they the genius pioneers who gave us the stars and the speed of ghosts? Or are they the demons of an industrial military complex that ensures war is a permanent, profitable state of being? The answer, hauntingly, is that they are both. They are the mirror of our own human ambition, our desperate need to protect ourselves, and our insatiable hunger to dominate our rivals. When you look up tomorrow and see a thin, white streak etched across the blue, take a moment to really look at it. To some, that line represents the ultimate triumph of human ingenuity, a sign of a guardian watching from above. To others, it is a scar on the sky, a herald of a coming storm. It could be a symbol of lasting peace, secured through the threat of overwhelming force. or it could be the final stroke in the story of a nation. We have mastered the air, we have harnessed the spectrum, and we are reaching for the stars. But as Lockheed Martin reminds us, every time we push the boundaries of what is possible, we must ask ourselves if we are prepared for what follows. Because in the world of the architects, once the impossible is done, there is no turning back.